The private investigator report had just arrived, and I could feel the frustration mounting within me. This was the fourth investigation in as many years, each one seemingly more futile than the last. Jason Thomas, private investigator extraordinaire, had been the latest to take on my case. I had resorted to using 4 different private investigator firms over the past 4 years, hoping that switching cities and times of the year would throw off my wife and her lover. But this new investigator had promised to catch them in the act. I had just finished a call with Mr. Thomas, who informed me that his team had surveilled both my wife Molly and John Decker for a week. They followed them from their office here for the first 4 days, and then trailed them to Dallas, where they attended a supposed work seminar for 3 days. As I listened to the details, I couldn't help but feel a pang of anger and betrayal towards my unfaithful spouse. As the administrative assistant to CEO, John Decker, my wife Molly spent the majority of her time traveling with him for his duties as head of a fully owned subsidiary of a major international company. Mr. Thomas, our private investigator, had promised to send us a written report. But from what he had already gathered, it seemed that for the 4 days leading up to their trip to Dallas, Molly and John were under constant surveillance. Despite this, they continued their regular routine of having lunch together before heading back to work. On the second day, however, they deviated from their usual pattern and stopped at a local bar after work. Each of them had 2 drinks before parting ways and heading home to their spouses, who were waiting for them. We decided to end our surveillance, assuming that the spouses would be aware of their activities until the next morning. The following 3 days passed without incident, as both Molly and John went straight home from work, where their spouses were already waiting for them. The Dallas trip was slightly more interesting, but not by much. Each of the 3 days, they dutifully attended the work seminar during the day. As the sun set and the city lights came to life, they would have dinner together before heading out for a night of dancing. The energy of the music pulsed through their bodies as they twirled and swayed on the dance floor, lost in the moment. After about an hour of dancing and drinks, they would return to their separate hotel rooms, located 10 doors apart from each other. A surveillance camera positioned down the hallway revealed that they did not leave their rooms until the next morning. The only thing that raised suspicion was their behavior on the dance floor. My agent described it as 2 people deeply in love, moving in perfect sync with each other. Though there was no inappropriate touching, there was a level of closeness between them that couldn't be denied. He always had his arm wrapped around her waist as they made their way back to their table, lost in each other's company. The agent meticulously followed them to the airport, making sure they boarded the plane and that it took off for their journey home. The sleek, metallic body of the airplane gleamed under the bright airport lights as it taxied down the runway. Despite 4 private investigator reports conducted randomly over the course of 4 years, no new information was found. It was as if their lives were a blank slate, with nothing noteworthy to report. Molly and I have been married for 15 years, both now 36 years old. We were high school sweethearts and continued our exclusive relationship through college before getting married soon after graduation. Molly has always had a certain charm about her, not conventionally beautiful, but with a pixie-like cuteness that draws people in. Standing at 5'6", she boasts a stunning figure that turns heads wherever she goes. Meanwhile, her boss John Decker is a tall, handsome man who stands at 6'1" and weighs 190 pounds. Despite being similar in size to me, John exudes an undeniable charisma that captures the attention of all those around him. Many women can't help but be drawn to him, making me feel somewhat inadequate in comparison. Throughout the past few weeks, I have caught glimpses of Molly's apparent closeness with John Decker. At first, she vehemently denied any romantic involvement between them, assuring me that he was simply a co-worker and a good friend. In fact, she even offered to take a lie detector test at any time to prove her innocence. But during our last conversation about it, she referred to John as a special friend, hinting at something more. My suspicions were further confirmed when Molly and I went out for dinner and danced with John and his wife Gail. Throughout the night, I couldn't help but notice how often John and Molly talked and danced with each other, more so than with their own spouses. Even Gail seemed to pick up on their closeness, giving them a raised eyebrow whenever they hit the dance floor yet again. It was clear that their relationship extended beyond just being co-workers or friends, causing me to question what exactly was going on between them. And now, with John's recent promotion, my suspicions only grow stronger. My thoughts have been consumed with Molly and her closeness to John. I can't help but feel a twinge of jealousy every time she mentions his name. I've talked to Molly about finding another job, one that wouldn't bring her into such close proximity with him, but she tells me it's ridiculous and insists that she would never betray me. Yet, my suspicions linger. I have thrown thousands of dollars towards private investigators in the past 4 years, hoping to uncover any secrets or infidelity, but they have turned up nothing. Last night, as I walked by the kitchen table, I noticed Molly sitting there with a more serious expression than usual. She asked if we could talk for a minute, and when I sat down, she said that John and Gail had invited us to their lake house for the weekend. She told them we would have to check with me first before confirming. While part of me was excited at the thought of escaping from our normal routine, another part of me couldn't help but think 5 days a week at work isn't enough. Now you want to spend weekends with him too. I strained to come up with a reason not to go, but ultimately gave in and reluctantly agreed. Despite my displeasure, I tried my best to put on a happy face and said, okay. Little did Molly know, my mind was filled with doubts and fears about spending even more time in close proximity with the man who haunted my thoughts day and night. The sun was starting to set as Molly and I loaded up the car and made our way towards John and Gail's lake house. My heart raced with excitement for the weekend ahead, but also with a touch of nerves. We had a map to guide us, but I secretly hoped that Molly had never been there before. I wanted to surprise her. After driving for about 50 miles, we finally caught a glimpse of the sparkling blue lake in the distance. The peaceful scenery was a welcome change from the hustle and bustle of city life. As we drew closer, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation building inside me. It took some time to navigate through the winding roads, but eventually we found our way to their house. As we pulled up to the front porch, I could see 4 figures waiting for us. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized John, but the other 3 were strangers to me. The only person missing was Gail, John's wife. I assumed she must be inside preparing for our arrival. The welcoming committee consisted of a towering, muscular man who looked like he could lift a car with one hand, a middle-aged woman who exuded warmth and kindness, and an incredibly beautiful young woman who seemed to radiate confidence. Her long red hair cascaded down her back in waves, and her figure was accentuated by a skimpy bikini, quite the contrast from everyone else's shorts and t-shirts. We parked the car and made our way towards the porch. After being introduced to everyone, my mind couldn't help but wonder where Gail was. John casually mentioned that she wasn't there without any explanation. It struck me as odd that we had come specifically to visit John and Gail, yet she was nowhere to be seen. A small twinge of disappointment crept into my thoughts, but I pushed it aside and focused on enjoying the company of our hosts, including the mysterious absence of Gail. As soon as I laid eyes on Molly and John, my spidey senses started tingling. After all the years of wondering about their relationship, seeing them together in person was surreal. Gail's presence added to the tension. What did she know? And who was this gorgeous young woman with John? Molly seemed unsurprised to see the woman, which only added to my suspicions. We were shown to our room, a cozy den in the rustic cabin. The interior was spacious and charming, with at least 5 bedrooms and an equal number of bathrooms. Larry, a towering man with kind eyes, offered me a beer upon our arrival. His eagerness for one-on-one conversation made me wonder if he had something to hide. But after a pleasant 10 to 15-minute chat in the kitchen, I was ready to join the others in the great room. The scent of wood and fire filled the air as we all settled in for the evening. Upon entering the great room, Larry boisterously announced our return. But what struck me as even more peculiar was the sight of Molly and John standing in a secluded corner, awkwardly pulling away from each other as if caught in a forbidden embrace. Their faces were flushed, and their body language was tense. I couldn't help but feel unsettled by everything I had witnessed. Gail's absence, Larry's strange behavior, and now this intimate moment between Molly and John. Who was the stunning young girl with them? And why did Molly seem to be so affectionate towards John? I couldn't shake off my unease, so I motioned for Molly to follow me back into the kitchen. I needed answers to all these confounding questions. It was clear that there was more going on than meets the eye, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it all. Molly broke away from me as we entered the kitchen and turned to John, asking if there was somewhere private that we could talk. Her request seemed expected by those around us, but my instincts were on high alert. John nodded towards a nearby room, and Molly and I stepped inside, closing the door behind us. The air in the room felt tense and almost suffocating. "Molly, what is happening?" I asked, trying to contain my growing unease. She wore an expression of fear and anxiety, as if she had been dreading this conversation. "Tom, I haven't been completely honest with you about this weekend. Please let me explain everything without interruption. I promise to answer all of your questions afterwards." She took a deep breath before continuing. To start off, Gail decided not to come this weekend. "Gail, John, and I have been meeting over lunches and dinners to plan this weekend," she continued, her words coming out in a rush. "And when I finish explaining everything, you'll understand why you weren't invited to these meetings." It was mostly Gail's idea, with some input from John and me. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. John's acceptance of a promotion had forced the couple to make a sudden move to England. The news came as a shock to Gail, who would have to leave behind everything she knew and loved in just 2 weeks. To make matters worse, John's replacement was announced, a woman from the Cleveland office. I couldn't help but feel resentment towards John for both his departure and the arrival of a female colleague. But despite my initial anger, there were 3 important things I needed to confess to my partner. First and foremost, I reassured them that our relationship had always remained purely professional. We had never crossed any lines or shared a bed together. However, as difficult as it was for me to admit, I also had to tell them that I was not only still in love with them, but I had also developed feelings for John. Unable to contain my emotions any longer, I leaped up from my seat and erupted in disbelief. How could they bring me to this man's house to reveal they were leaving me for the same person? With venom in my voice, I declared that I was done and stormed out. It dawned on me then that we no longer had a home. It was now in England, with the very person who had torn us apart. As I made my way towards the door, Molly's grasp on my arm tightened. Her panicked voice echoed through the room. "Please, Tom, that is not at all what I said. Please sit down and let me finish." Her words were urgent, filled with a desperation that I had never heard before. My heart began to race as I turned to face her. I love you, she continued, her voice trembling. And I'm not leaving you, ever, ever. You're my husband, and I will be with you until death do us part. I could feel myself starting to calm down as I sat back in my chair, but my mind was still reeling from Molly's outburst. She took a deep breath before continuing. Let me reiterate, everything is basically Gail's idea. I nodded, trying to process her words. Gail? Who is Gail? Molly sighed, looking exhausted. Gail is our boss, the one who invited us here this weekend. My confusion only grew as Molly went on to explain who the other people in the room were. The nice man that you talked to in the kitchen is Larry. He is head of security at our company and is only here to make sure everyone is happy. I couldn't help but interject, trying to break the tension with a joke. So he is here to keep me in line, right? Molly didn't answer, instead continuing with introductions of the other people in the room. Jackie, the beautiful girl over there, is also here for you if you so desire. She is a sweetheart and also happens to be a high-end escort. My jaw dropped at this revelation, and I shot a questioning look at Molly. It's just for show, she reassured me quickly. Don't worry about it. And finally, Molly gestured towards the middle-aged lady in the group. This is Janet. She's actually Larry's wife and also happens to be a great cook. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My peaceful weekend away with my wife had suddenly turned into something out of a soap opera. But as I looked around the room at these strangers who held so many secrets and connections, I knew that there was more to this weekend than meets the eye. And I had a feeling that Molly wasn't telling me everything. A flicker of realization lit up my mind, illuminating the hidden truth behind this whole charade. In an instant, I saw through Molly, John, and Gail's plan. Molly knew that after this weekend, John would be out of her life for good. So, they had arranged to finally be together as lovers during these few fleeting days. But after that, John and his wife Gail would be off on their grand adventure in England. On Sunday, after bearing witness to my wife's infidelity all weekend long, we would hold hands and pretend that everything was normal and happy. Was she truly insane? Larry was brought in as a precaution to make sure I didn't do anything drastic, like killing John or drowning my unfaithful wife. And then there was Jackie, here to offer me some semblance of companionship in this twisted scenario. Both were essentially pawns in this game, with the same ultimate goal as Larry, to ensure John and Molly had their precious weekend of love and passion. Molly's voice was tinged with frustration and anger as she spoke. All right, Molly, I don't agree with any of this bullshit. Tom looked around the lake house, his gaze searching for Gail. Where the hell is Gail? You say this is all her idea. Where the hell is she? Molly took a deep breath before answering. She decided that, for her emotional well-being, it would be best for her not to be here. In return for the weekend, John has signed a post-nuptial agreement stating that if he and I have any contact of any kind at any time in the future, he would get nothing in a divorce. Gail gets 100% of the assets. A heavy silence hung between them as Tom processed the information. I have signed a similar paper for you, Molly continued. Both papers begin when John and Gail leave for England. Since John and I work together, they also stipulate no sexual or romantic contact between this Sunday evening and when they leave for England. After this weekend, Tom, I will truly be all yours, and I swear to spend the rest of my life making up for the hurt I'm causing you now. Tom's eyes flickered with hurt and confusion as he asked, Why am I here when Gail isn't? Molly sighed. Easy. There is no way that you would agree to let me come to John's lake house without you. Same reason you weren't invited to the planning luncheons. She paused before adding bitterly, You would have just said hell no to everything. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "And what if I just say no to the whole goddamn thing now and ask you to either join me for an immediate trip back home or stay here with John and say goodbye to our marriage?" Molly's expression turned pleading. "Tom, it's not like that. Please understand that although you are my lifelong soulmate, I need this weekend with John for closure." She handed him a slip of paper with Gail's number on it. "Also, Gail is expecting a call from you." Tom's heart felt heavy as he looked at his wife, knowing that their marriage was hanging by a thread. "Molly, I'm asking you one more time not to do this." Molly's footsteps echoed through the room as she made her way towards me, a determined look on her face. She leaned in and planted a passionate kiss on my lips, leaving me momentarily breathless. "It'll be okay, you'll see," she whispered, before turning and walking out of the room with John by her side. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off as Larry kept a watchful eye on me for the rest of the evening. He stayed close, always between me and John, like a protective barrier. At that moment, I considered just leaving and filing for divorce. But I needed to know what was going on, why Molly was suddenly acting this way. I found Jackie and confided in her, telling her that Molly was tempting, but I wasn't going to help her break our wedding vows. That was something she would have to do all on her own. I also gave Jackie the option to leave or stay and witness the chaos. The next time I saw the lovers was at dinner. It was clear that Janet had been instructed where to seat everyone. John sat at the head of the table with Molly by his side. Larry was seated between John and myself, with Jackie next to me. Janet took a seat across from her husband Larry when she wasn't busy serving us food. The tension at the table was palpable, as we all tried to navigate this strange dynamic. As I glanced over at my wife, Jackie, during dinner, I couldn't help but notice that she was not wearing her wedding rings. The glint of sunlight off her bare fingers was like a slap in the face, confirming my deepest fears. I sat in silence throughout the meal, unable to speak anything other than "not good" as I pointed to her ringless hand. She seemed to ignore my comments and simply continued eating, all while shooting sly looks at John. After dinner, Jackie changed into a stunning red bikini and headed for a swim in the pool. I watched her from my seat on the edge of the pool, regretting my decision not to use her services. To make matters worse, John and Molly appeared, hand in hand, both sporting swimsuits. Larry, attempting to make conversation with me, only made it painfully obvious that this entire situation had been orchestrated. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more surreal, Molly came over and sat down next to me. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I love you, Tom. It'll all work out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman was clearly out of her mind. I stood up abruptly and walked away, making sure to say loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Go to hell." The rest of the evening was spent avoiding everyone, except for Larry, who always seemed to have his eye on me from a distance. I found comfort in his presence, as we had a strong friendship that could withstand any awkward situation. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease and decided to call Gail for some insight into this train wreck of a situation. She answered on the first ring, her voice heavy with sadness. "Hey, Gail, it's Tom. I know you must have seen my number on your call ID. How's the whole mess going? Are you still at the lake house?" Her response caught me off guard, Tom. "I'm so sorry for causing all of this chaos. My intentions were never to hurt you or Molly." I interrupted her, panic rising in my chest. What the hell made you think this was a good idea? This could ruin my marriage to Molly. Gail took a deep breath before explaining her thought process. "I'll admit, I was only thinking about my own marriage with John. I didn't consider the consequences for you and Molly. In my mind, women are more forgiving of infidelity than men are." My mind raced as I tried to understand her reasoning. But why would you risk everything for an affair? And how could you offer them a weekend of sex and love, like it's some kind of trade-off? Gail's voice softened. John has been suffering for years with Molly's refusal of sex. She always told him she wouldn't cheat behind your back, but I could see their connection growing stronger every day they were apart. I just wanted to prevent any potential contact between them in the future, because it could financially ruin both of them if it ever came out. My heart sank as I realized the gravity of the situation. Gail had purposely kept me out of the planning because she knew I would never agree to such a reckless plan. As I entered the bedroom, my heart sank at the sight of the empty space where Molly's belongings used to be. It was now just my room, a painful reminder of our shattered relationship. The thought of Molly and John together in their new bedroom only added to my sadness. In bed, I couldn't stop thinking about how Molly could believe that we could simply go back to the way things were after this weekend. Did she truly think that we could move past her 4-year emotional affair with John without any consequences? Were they so entitled, so consumed by their own desires, that they believed everyone would understand and accept their actions? Around midnight, there was a soft knock on the door and Jackie entered. She asked if I was okay and hinted at her availability if needed. I thanked her for her offer, but declined, feeling overwhelmed with emotions. She mentioned that her original room was also mine before she found an unassigned one. Unable to sleep, I ventured out to the pool area. I could hear the soothing sound of water from the hot tub and dragged a lounge chair closer to it. As I settled in, exhaustion took over and I drifted off into an uneasy sleep. I was awoken by voices approaching the pool. My heart raced as I recognized them to be Molly and John's. They couldn't see me behind the short rock wall separating us, but I was only 10 feet away. Molly's voice filled with excitement as she told John how much she had longed for this moment, how much she loved him. Her words stung like a knife in my chest as she spoke about how they only had 2 days to make up for lost time. She suggested getting naked and making love in the pool, offering to get drinks for them both. Molly gracefully rose from her seat and excused herself to the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I could feel a knot forming in my stomach, threatening to make me sick. The thought of my entire life falling apart because of this despicable man made me want to vomit. As I watched Molly disappear into the kitchen, I couldn't help but despise her for the emptiness that now consumed me. Everything seemed dark and bleak, like a void had opened up inside of me. When John emerged from his suit and joined Molly in the kitchen, I crept up behind him. In a fit of rage, I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Hey, asshole!" It seemed that asshole had become his new nickname in my mind. John turned to face me just as I aimed a swift kick toward his groin, hoping to ruin his weekend of sleeping with my wife. However, my aim was slightly off, and instead of hitting him where it would really hurt, I caught him in the lower abdomen. The pain was enough to cause him to double over and fall backward into the pool. I knew Larry would be awake by now and on his way out to see what all the commotion was about, but I wasn't worried about a physical confrontation with him. He may have some choice words for me, but he wouldn't risk assault charges, and besides, the damage had already been done to his boss. At that moment, one thing became very clear to me. Molly's loyalty lay with John. She came running to his aid, not even bothering to check on me. I couldn't take it anymore. With tears streaming down my face, I grabbed my bag and headed out to my car. Before leaving, though, I did one last thing. I took off my wedding ring and left it on the kitchen counter for Molly to find later. Maybe then, she would finally understand just how much she had hurt me. The weekend dragged on as I sat in my recliner, staring blankly at the TV. The images on the screen held no interest for me. My mind was consumed with thoughts of my wife with that despicable man, John. Knowing the layout of our lake house all too well, I could envision them in every room, embracing with triumphant grins, kissing passionately as they gazed out at the water, entwined in bed while he did things that should only be reserved for me. The betrayal cut deep, and I found myself resenting her more and more with each passing minute. As the hours ticked by, I couldn't help but wonder if she would even bother coming back home. A part of me almost wished she wouldn't. Where else would she have to go? But then Sunday evening brought a car pulling up in front of our house. It was John and Molly. They sat together, holding hands and talking for what felt like an eternity, occasionally stealing kisses from one another. Finally, John emerged from the car with the intention of getting around to Molly's side to open her door, a grand gesture clearly meant for my benefit. But his body betrayed him, stiff and pained from the kick I had given him just 2 days prior. He had to cling to both fenders of the car just to make his way around to her door. Even then, it was clear he was struggling as he helped Molly out of the car. In fact, it seemed more like Molly was helping him rather than the other way around. A small sense of satisfaction filled me as I watched their awkward struggle. My parting shot at the lake house had clearly put a damper on their illicit love affair. The tension hung thick in the air, suffocating and palpable. John and Molly held on to each other, their bodies entwined like two lovers who couldn't bear to let go. For my benefit, they had made this show of giving her back to me after she had stayed with him when she had a choice between us at the lake house. I could feel my blood boiling as I stood in the doorway, watching them cling to each other without a care for what anyone else might think. But I had reached my breaking point. I stormed out of the house and toward John, ready to do more than just kick his ass if he didn't leave in 5 seconds. He limped quickly back to his car and drove away. As I walked back into the house, anger still coursing through my veins, I sat down in my recliner. But Molly hadn't even bothered to watch John drive away. She strolled in with a fake smile, plastered on her face, as if she had just returned from a fun evening with friends. Her attitude was absurd and infuriating. Ignoring her attempts at affection, I turned up the volume on the TV. But she persisted, trying to kiss me until I finally pushed her away. With a heavy heart and gritted teeth, I spoke the only words that needed to be said. "You'll be staying in the guest bedroom from now on. Tomorrow, I'll be seeing a lawyer to start the paperwork for a legal separation. Maybe someday one of us will meet someone new and want a divorce, but for now, we can coexist here." With that, I went back to watching TV. But as Molly made her way up the stairs, broken sobs escaping her lips, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt and sorrow. In just one weekend, she had lost both her lover and her husband.